Welcome to the Kickstart My Franchise podcast. I'm your host, Tim Michaels. Today's guest has over 21 years of experience in the window covering industry and is the current CEO of a very fast-growing franchise called Bloomin Blinds. I'm very excited to welcome Kelsey Stuart to our show today. Welcome, Kelsey.
Thanks, Tim. Really excited to be here.
Well, we're here to talk primarily about Bloomin Blinds. So first things first, how did Bloomin Blinds, get started?
This is really kind of one of those all-American tales, to be completely honest. So my mom started Bloomin Blinds when my brothers and I were in high school. She's a serial entrepreneur. She saw an ad in a newspaper for a blind cleaning tank. Had never heard of blind cleaning, so as an entrepreneur, she thought surely there must be a need for that. And ended up acquiring that tank, putting an ad in the newspaper, and in our little small town in Washington State, got a bunch of phone calls for blind repair. Kind of had to pivot a little bit. Ended up building her own business for like 8 years as a one-woman show. And then ultimately sold that after a divorce and moved to Texas. And wanted to restart the business kind of in that same model. But very quickly, my brothers and I jumped in. We kind of followed her down to Texas from Washington. And then we kind of became just this family company running through Texas, doing sales and install and repair.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was just mom being that natural entrepreneur that she is.
That's fantastic. And so at what point did you guys decide, like, okay, maybe we should consider franchising this? And what was that journey like?
I was the one that was kind of driving the franchising or the expansion idea. I've watched my parents be entrepreneurs all my life. I've never seen them have a 9-to-5 job. And as we started to work together as a family business, it kind of occurred to me that if we don't find another way, then we're going to be an entrepreneur or like an owner operator family. And my parents have always been owner operators. They've always been at the cash register, if you will. And so somehow, some way, I knew that we needed to create an empire or I was going to be doing the same thing and at the register myself. And it took about 10 years of daydreaming before we ever actually did anything about it. And it was either company stores or it was franchising. We didn't really have the capital to do company stores and didn't have the skill set to manage people from a distance. And so franchising seemed to be a little bit better path for us at the moment, even though we really didn't know what we were getting into, to be honest. Just the idea that there's an ownership element that's going to hold a business to a high standard. So when they're a franchise owner in a different city or state, because it's theirs and because they care about it, felt like that was going to give a better customer experience than trying to manage people in Kansas City from a distance.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of different reasons. We knew we wanted to expand. We just didn't know how. Franchising has turned out to be a fantastic model for us.
And how difficult was that process, like, of actually converting to a franchise relative to what you guys were expecting? Like, way easier, way harder, about what you expected?
So the process of becoming a franchise wasn't all that bad because we really didn't understand franchising. Like, as I sit here today, 9 years down the road, knowing all the complexities and responsibilities, legalities, the actual importance that a good franchisor plays in the system. If I had known all of that back in the day, it would have been a lot scarier. Like, we just kind of ran towards it because we were fairly ignorant about what the actual responsibility of being a franchisor was.
Yeah.
We took our time, and it took probably 2 years of real deep and purposeful investigation before we actually pulled the trigger and moved forward. But we're a family that's always liked blazing new paths and conquering things that scare us. So that part wasn't so bad. It was just we had no idea what we were getting into.
Yeah. There's a lot that goes into that whole process. And then I think, after you get the FDD together, the operating manual, there's just so much more on the back end as far as like bringing in the franchisees and then actually supporting them than, people might think of. I'm curious, slightly outside of the franchise realm, but more in the territory of a family, run business. A lot of people who open franchise franchises as franchisees. It's a family run business. Can you just talk about like the complexities and difficulties of a family run business and how it can be done so effectively? Because I know oftentimes it leads to a lot of tension, friction, and it can have pretty bad results.
Yeah, I've talked to candidates, I've talked to current owners about family, and ultimately, I think it could be either exponentially advantageous or exponentially explosive. There's rarely any middle ground. It's either like a huge strength or a huge problem. Um, I think you have a couple pieces, and or at least I can take it from our frame of reference. So in this case, in the beginning, you had mom and three boys, but in that environment, mom was clearly the boss. Now the boys had responsibilities, or we had things that we were kind of the general leader of, but everything still had to get approved by mom, if you will. In the
Mhm.
franchising space, mom's retired and the boys run the business. The upside to us is you have three uniquely different, distinct individuals with different ideas, mindsets, ways of processing information. And we've kind of adopted this all for one for all. Um, Another mantra we use is the moment one of us gets greedy, this whole thing gets ruined. Um, this concept that we can work within our strengths. We still have to kind of explain or answer to the others, but ultimately we've all agreed to trust each other in that particular space. So
Mhm.
whatever, like for me, I'm Fran Dev, I'm marketing, I'm kind of that sales side of the business. And so I don't go make independent choices, but I get to a point where I'm like, hey, I want to do this and this is why. And then everyone gets an opportunity to ask questions, talk about it, and then ultimately we vote to move forward or not. But by and large, I trust them in their fields and their departments, and they trust me in mine. So
I
I
bet
think
on the
for
voting side, it's nice that you have an odd number there.
it is well, and the voting thing is kind of one of our dynamics. The In our office, when two agree, it's settled. And if
Yeah,
you're the odd man out, suck it up.
yeah.
Like it, there's just, and I mean, like literally, we have changed shirts at a conference because of the vote, and we've signed $200,000 agreements because of the vote.
Yeah,
So you have to honor it. And that's kind of that's that common thread that has been in our family business is you have to treat it special every time. Just because you're family doesn't mean you get to abuse the rules or the situation. It doesn't give you the right to create chaos just because you're family. It actually creates a higher sense of responsibility to not mess up the business because you're family.
yeah. No, that's super interesting. I've seen firsthand, family businesses go haywire. So it sounds like you guys are on a pretty good path. Although I'm sure there's always some sort of healthy friction. Um, as far as Bloomin' Blinds is concerned, can you talk to us a little bit more about what is the actual services that you're providing? How do you differentiate from competitors?
Yeah. So Bloomin is a well, we're in the home service space, so we're dealing with window coverings in general. So blinds, shades, shutters, exterior products, awnings, and exterior drapes, the motorized screens that'll like frame in a patio. Um, and by and large, we're not a lot different in those services than just about every other window covering company. So most window covering companies offer some or all the same stuff we do. And kind of the dirty secret of the industry is we're all buying it from basically the same place. So we tell franchise candidates all the time, like you can't win in this industry on product differentiation or price differentiation. We all sell the same stuff for about the same price.
Mm,
It's it's the emotional experience. It's the education behind it. It's the way you approach customers, the transparency, integrity, the good old school things that should be in business. On top of a really good delivery and presentation, speed to appointment, value add conversation. Like there's a lot of those little nuances that go into it, but our separation primarily is the way in which we go about it and the education that we're providing customers. We have some other elements like the fact that we do repairs. For the by and large, most window coverings will need some form of maintenance, and like 99.8% of all window covering companies will only sell and install. They don't want to touch that maintenance side of things. And we grew up that way. We repaired before we sold.
I was gonna say that goes back to your mom, I bet.
Yeah. And it's not a big ticket. I mean, the repairs is a fraction of what new transactions are, but it's a great way to earn a customer's trust and to help them understand that you're not some blood-sucking vampire, that you're going to treat them well, you're going to do what's good for them, even if it's not necessarily what's best for you. Because if it is repairable, we will fix it.
Hmm.
Um, the other part that we've got going for us is we've always been a very tech-forward company. So we like to joke with franchise candidates, like if you have a hard time getting on a Zoom call, like Bloomin is going to be a problem. We've built our entire infrastructure on machine learning and AI infrastructure. So there's a lot of interactive tools for the franchise owners for scalability. There's a lot of engagement pieces that are built for the consumer to help them get a better experience. So we've always been very tech forward. I'm 47 and I'm the old guy. So technology is really comfortable for us. We kind of grew up as it was coming into the marketplace.
It's
Um,
awesome.
so we're just running a good, solid business, being honest and treating people right. And that there's a little bit more than goes into that, but that's the baseline of how we build.
Fantastic. In terms of your actual size, like how big are you? How fast are you growing? How big do you want to get?
Yeah. So right now there's 77 owners and I think like 154 territories. Franchising counts the territories, we count the owners. That's, I mean, in a footprint of the United States, we probably have 850 territories available. So, in terms of total blanket coverage, we've got a long way to go. We have accelerated over the last couple of years. I think reputation and financial strength of the franchise owners is really helping push that forward. Um, my long term goal is to be a household name. We want to be synonymous with those larger companies that roll off the tongue in home
Mhm.
service. Um, and I think that's a feasible goal. That's years and years away, but um, we have been on a nice steady growth rate. We're not a viral company. There are some franchises that literally go into like a viral state, and we're well beyond the little mom and pop, like just fledgling brand new franchise. So we've had a good run. We're launching on average 30 to 40 owners a year. And while my ego wants more, like our system really likes that. Like
Yeah.
that's a volume flow that is really comfortable for us, and we can do a good
Yeah.
job
Well, that's a
supporting it.
very healthy pace, not going quite too fast that you can't support everybody. So that feels like a great speed. Um, as far as, the most successful franchisees in your system, what sort of traits or characteristics do you see from them that really enable them to take off?
Yeah, from what I know in franchising and the other franchises that I've gotten to know personally, I don't think our best performing franchise owners are a lot different than other industries. So this is really kind of like an overall, and like if you're going to succeed in franchising, like keep these things in mind. Like, do you have these things? By and large, you need to treat your franchise or as a mentor. They've got a model that works. You clearly believe so because you just laid down a boatload of cash to open a business, and you need to use those resources. You need to lean on them and dig in deep and make sure you get everything you can out of all that experience and knowledge and support. So someone who likes a mentor and a coach, not an independent who wants to buy a logo and then be left alone. Like
Hmm.
that's not going to yield the highest results.
Yeah.
um, it's also someone who's remains a student even though they get good at things. We talk a lot about the damage and the negative effects that pride can have. And we've learned to have to talk about this because you get a lot of achievers in franchising. That's how they got to a point where they can make these choices.
Hmm.
And sometimes you get an achiever who's quite confident in their own personal abilities, regardless of the environment. And that can be a struggle for grown adults to ask for help or guidance or take that coaching. But if you hold on to a student mentality, if you stay humble and know that there's always somebody who knows more than you do, like the likelihood of you growing your business, growing your knowledge, your capabilities, it stays relevant regardless of how big of a business you operate.
Hmm.
Um, and then there's just the abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset, believing that there's always room for you, for your business, for your expansion. Um, those positive outlooks are sometimes just what can push you over the edge if a day is long or hard. It's what I can tell you though is it has nothing to do with the widget. It has nothing to do with window coverings or experience or I'm handy or I used to sell cars and so I can talk to people. The personality and home service, that has something to do with it. But by and large, it's all about the mentality of using your resources as a strength, not seeing them as a limiter of your creative freedom.
Hmm. So let's say I do my research. I decide I love Bloomin' Blinds. I want to become a franchisee. What's it going to take as far as financials, and then like to actually get this started? Like, what kind of large equipment am I going to need to purchase? How many employees am I going to need? That sort of thing.
Got it. Um, with working capital, a franchise owner can start Bloomin' Blinds for about 100 grand. Okay, so that's one territory. The only thing that's not really included in that would be a vehicle. So we're a mobile service. We drive commercial vans. So that needs to be financed over and above that $100,000. But 100 grand will get you started with equipment, materials, franchise fees, training, all that jazz. Most of our franchise owners are coming to us with a ambitious owner operator business plan. So they're looking to start off as like they're willing to get in the truck, they're willing to learn the industry, learn the thing so that they can lead it. We do have franchise owners that kind of start off from a distance. They hire managers, they hire people to run the business. That's a select few, and you really have to have the skill set to manage that well. But most of our franchise owners are willing to jump in, learn it, and then want to begin to scale it and add employees as quickly as possible. Kind of nice in that we can easily operate out of a home if you have an environment or your wife is willing to let, or your spouse is willing to let you. Um, you can run the business in basically one bay of a garage pretty easily. So often we're home based. We don't carry any inventory. Um, and it's a very light employee load. Like even our franchise owners that are doing a couple million a year, they might have 3 to 5 employees to do that kind of volume.
And what
So
are
we're
those
not,
employees doing? Is that like a salesperson, or what would that split look like if you did get to that volume?
yeah, in that scenario, the owners that are at that level are still in the business. Like they're still driving the business forward. They're still out there working with customers. So they're primarily the main salesperson. And it's not that they have to be there financially. They could probably get themselves out of it. It's just I think they like it. I think they enjoy being in the house working with customers and helping them daydream. It's a lot of fun. The employees, by and large, are your install and your repair, and probably a little bit of sales. I know a couple of franchise owners that have dedicated salespeople, but by and large, the majority of our franchise owners, we're kind of more of that, um, hands-on in the business. This is your main gig. We're not a side gig. We're the main gig kind of franchise.
Hmm, got it. Makes a lot of sense. As far as the financials are concerned, can you give any sort of sneak peek as far as what your item 19 says, or what people will find when they start looking at that document?
Yeah, we just refiled, so great timing for that. So anyone in a registration state, please plug your ears because we're not we're not approved in the registration yet because we just filed. Um, by and large, well, I guess for that reason, I'm going to keep it a little generic.
Sure.
So, so the system-wide average is around 500,000, a little bit north of 500,000 per business per year. When you start looking at some of our more recent franchise owners who have launched, um, we documented their first full year in business. So those that launched in 22 were in business all of 23. We have a full P&L workup of their business and whatnot, and it's almost as much as the average because the
Well,
new ones are coming out faster with more advanced tools, more advanced mindset. What was really interesting about the way that we organized the info in the FDD is we ran a full complete financial workup of P&Ls for owners that have one van and owners that have two or more vans. And the owners that had one van, their average revenue was just under 500 grand. The owners that have two or more vans, it was over 1.1 million.
mm,
So what we're trying to help franchise owners understand and get excited about is the multiplicity, or I don't even know if that's a real word. Anyways, the dynamic effect
that
of
was real to
adding,
me.
yeah, I sell it well. Um, the dynamic effect of having a second or third van on the road, like it literally doubles the business. And you need to put the van out there to get the doubling effect. You can't wait for that volume and then add the van. But
Mm,
we have, I mean, our item 19, I think it has like 15 different P&Ls. Like our top third, middle third, bottom third, there's P&Ls for all of that. First year in business, system average, and then one van, two vans. I mean, we have tried to create extreme transparency in presenting the financials because we feel like people really need to know it. Like that's, you're talking about a brand new chapter in your life. And I want to
mhm.
make sure you know everything you can about Bloomin' Blinds and what the financial performance looks like.
And
Um,
that's greatly appreciated because I speak with candidates all the time who are so frustrated by the brands that just don't share any information or share very limited. So kudos to you for doing that.
yeah, it's a massive amount of work. I have to do it. I'm the one that does it all, and it's weeks of data and crunching and formulation. But that's how we tell the world that we're not hiding anything behind the curtain.
Hmm. Absolutely. So if I'm considering a franchise, there's a lot of options out there, supposedly 4,000 in the US. What are the
Mm-hmm.
top reasons why I should consider becoming a Blooming Blinds franchisee?
Yeah. Again, I think this kind of goes back to general franchising. Like I suppose I could tee this up as a pitch for Bloomin', but we match all these things that I'm going to suggest. We are a franchise that spends more energy and effort on teaching people how to run a business than we focus on the widget of window coverings. We think window coverings is a widget. And once you understand the dynamics of business, effectively creating money out of thin air, you can interchange the widget. It's a skill set. And so we really think it's important, kind of like the teaching people to fish analogy. All right. Um, so we want to build business people who happen to be in the window covering industry at this moment. Um, so if you can find a franchisor who has a heart for that, can clearly articulate it and demonstrate that it's true, like that's wonderful. Like that's a value add. Not only did you get the profitable business, but then you got all this education behind it. Um, like I said, we are a bit more on that owner operator start side. So if you've got someone who wants to keep their day job, who wants to throw a bunch of money at it and trust other people to run their business, there are particular circumstances where we're up to that. By and large, franchise owners are the best fit if they're willing to get in, learn the business relatively quickly, and then begin to expanding it. Like that's the best possible environment for Bloomin'. We're not a stock. You can't just buy us and let it sit for 4 years and hope everything turns out rosy. I don't want that on my conscience, and I don't think that's necessarily the best way to do it.
Got
Um,
it.
so it's not about window coverings. No one ever daydreams about window coverings as a business. No one went, like high school career day. Like no one was like, I'm going to be a window covering professional. It's a great industry because it's low overhead, it's great margins, it's full of creativity and immediate gratification. So it's got a lot of those good things. Um, but it's just a widget. It's just a widget, and we're okay with that because I want to teach people about business.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that perspective. Super, super interesting and helpful. As far as, the context of this podcast, is there anything else that I didn't ask about, either Bloomin' Blinds or franchising in general, that, you'd like to cover?
I think one piece that I like to include in every conversation is that you before you head down the franchising road, like any candidate who's listening to this, like you need a good honest gut check. Can you work when nobody's watching? Do you already work when nobody's watching? Are you self-motivating, self-starting? Because we talk to a lot of candidates who are in a job, they've got somebody over them, and there's like that fear factor, like if you don't perform then we're going to fire you or demote or you'll be embarrassed or whatever. And those are external pressures that push people forward.
Yeah.
And when you're on your own, when you're in business for yourself, there aren't those external factors. Like you have to pull that from the internal well. Like that has to be part of your soul, or you have to work very hard and very quickly to develop it. I use an analogy. Are you a lion that is best in the zoo, or are you a lion that's best out in the pride? Because if you mix them up, if you put the lion in the pride in the zoo, he will tear his ears off.
Hmm.
If you put that zoo lion out in the pride, he's somebody's dinner or he's going to starve.
Yeah.
And it's okay to be whichever one you are, but you need to know it, because the ramifications of being wrong or reaching beyond what you're willing to actually work for could be very, very expensive or problematic. And so we really have a heart for helping people try and make sure that they're comfortable with that and that they understand the challenge ahead, because business is hard. You're going to work your butt off,
Hmm.
and you got to know that, and you got to be excited about it. Otherwise you shouldn't do it. Save yourself the trouble. Save all of us the trouble.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fantastic point. I think people really need to take a good hard look in the mirror and say, like, am I really self motivated, like you're saying? Because I think a lot of people, it sounds good hypothetically to be your own boss and all this stuff. But if you can't actually drive revenue forward and push yourself to do the little things that are going to make you be successful, you're probably better off just sticking with a W 2.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like I don't know how, but like the American dream, right? You use that phrase all the time, and somehow, some way, being in business for yourself became this like the best of the best do it. It's like this, only the cool kids do it, and so you get people chasing it who it may not be a good fit for.
Hmm.
And it's hard to watch that sometimes when somebody's dropping life savings and college funds into something that didn't work, and they shouldn't have been there in the first place. And if we're honest, I think everyone probably knew it, they just didn't want to admit it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I try and talk about that as much as I can.
Absolutely. Well, really appreciate your time here. It's definitely been insightful. I hope everyone learned a little bit. Check out Kelsey and Bloomin' Blinds if you get the chance. Appreciate your time here, Kelsey.
Yeah, happy to do it, Tim. Thanks.
If you enjoyed the discussion, please see the full episode on our YouTube channel or Spotify podcast links below.